Few shows have captivated audiences quite like Dallas, but behind the glitz and oil money lay secrets stranger than any JR scheme. From cowboy hats distributed to extras so Larry Hagman wouldn't look odd, to an entire season revealed as a dream, and to Mary Crosby being Bing Crosby's daughter, pulling the trigger on TV's most famous mystery, the real drama often happened off-camera. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Dallas. 1978. Fact 1. The show was originally set in Houston. When Dallas creators first pitched their idea for a primetime soap opera about a wealthy oil family, they weren't actually thinking about Dallas at all. The show was originally supposed to be set in Houston, Texas, which made perfect sense from a storytelling perspective since Houston was widely known as the oil capital of Texas during the 1970s. The city had built its reputation around the petroleum industry, with major oil companies headquartering their operations there, and the famous Houston Ship Channel serving as a crucial hub for oil refining and distribution. Dallas, on the other hand, was primarily recognized as a banking and finance center rather than an oil town. The city's economy revolved around financial institutions, corporate headquarters, and business services, making it seem like an unlikely choice for a show centered on oil barons and petroleum wealth. However, when the producers sat down to consider the practical aspects of their show's title and marketing appeal, they quickly realized they had a problem with their original Houston setting. The issue came down to something as simple as how the title would sound to television audiences. Houston just didn't have the same ring to it that Dallas did when spoken aloud. The word Dallas rolled off the tongue more smoothly and had a certain dramatic flair that seemed perfect for a nighttime soap opera. It sounded more glamorous, more mysterious, and more fitting for a show that would feature scheming oil tycoons and family drama. So, despite the geographical and industrial logic that pointed toward Houston as the natural setting, the producers made the decision to relocate their fictional Ewing family to Dallas purely because the name sounded better. This choice proved to be brilliant from a branding standpoint, as Dallas became one of the most recognizable television titles in history. The irony is that this iconic show about Texas oil wealth was set in a city that was actually better known for banking than petroleum, all because the producers thought Dallas had a more appealing sound than Houston when audiences heard it announced each week. Fact 2. Larry Hagman held producers hostage during filming. Larry Hagman pulled off one of the most audacious contract negotiations in television history by essentially holding the entire Dallas production hostage during the early days of filming. When the show began production, Hagman had not yet signed his contract to play J.R. Ewing, which created a massive problem for the producers who needed to keep filming on schedule while uncertain whether their main character would actually be available. The situation became so precarious that the production team had to develop backup plans that bordered on the absurd. They actually filmed Hagman's scenes in two completely different ways to prepare for the possibility that he might walk away from the show entirely. In one version, they shot scenes featuring a body double with the same haircut as Hagman, but the person was always facing away from the camera so audiences would never see their face. This would have allowed them to use a different actor's voice in post-production if needed. Even more bizarre was their second contingency plan, which involved filming scenes where JR appeared completely bandaged up, as if he had been severely beaten or bludgeoned in some kind of accident. The idea was that this would provide a storyline excuse to bring in a completely different actor to play JR after the character supposedly underwent reconstructive facial surgery to repair his injuries. The bandages would hide the fact that an entirely new person was playing the role. Meanwhile, Hagman knew exactly what kind of leverage he had over the production. Patrick Duffy, who played Bobby Ewing, later recalled phone conversations with Hagman during this tense period. When Duffy would tell Hagman about the elaborate workarounds the producers were creating, including the bandaged-up JR scenes, Hagman would simply respond that he knew the producers were in a tough spot and that he was ready to work once they met his terms. Hagman understood that the producers had invested too much in the show to let it fail over his contract, and he was absolutely right about having them cornered in the negotiations. Fact 3. Miss Ellie was only 9 years older than J.R. One of the most surprising casting facts about Dallas is that Barbara Bel Geddes, who played the wise and motherly Miss Ellie Ewing, was actually only 9 years older than Larry Hagman, who portrayed her eldest son J.R. This minimal age gap between the actors created an unusual situation where a television mother was nearly the same age as her supposed adult child, yet somehow the casting worked perfectly for the show. Barbara Bel Geddes was born in 1922, while Larry Hagman was born in 1931, making their real-life age difference less than a decade. In the context of the show's storyline, Miss Ellie was supposed to be the matriarch of the Ewing family who had raised 3 sons to adulthood, which would typically require a much larger age gap between mother and eldest son. Most television families feature actors where the parents are at least 15 to 20 years older than their adult children to make the family relationships seem believable. The casting directors and producers apparently prioritized finding the right actors for their respective roles, rather than focusing on creating a realistic age spread within the family. Barbara Bel Geddes brought exactly the kind of dignity, strength, and maternal presence that the character of Miss Ellie required, even though she was young enough to be Larry Hagman's older sister rather than his mother. Her background as a respected stage and screen actress gave her the gravitas needed to portray the family patriarch who could keep strong-willed characters like J.R. in line. Larry Hagman, meanwhile, was perfect for the role of the scheming oil baron J.R., and his natural charisma and ability to play both charming and ruthless made him ideal for the part. The fact that he was born in 1931 meant he was in his late 40s when the show began, which was exactly the right age to play a successful businessman who had spent decades building his power and influence in the oil industry. The small age gap between the actors never seemed to affect the believability of their on-screen relationship, as both performers were skilled enough to make their family dynamic feel authentic, despite the unusual casting situation. Fact 4. The original South Fork was kicked off for bad publicity. The famous South Fork Ranch that viewers came to know and love wasn't actually the first location used for the Ewing family home, and the reason Dallas had to find a new ranch reveals just how controversial the show was from its very beginning. The original South Fork was filmed at the Cloyce Box Ranch in Frisco, Texas, which featured a magnificent 14,000-square-foot colonial-style mansion that had been built in 1941 as a replica of Tara from the movie Gone with the Wind. Cloyce K. Box, the property owner, initially agreed to let the Dallas production team use his ranch for filming the show's first 5 episodes during 1978. However, as Box watched the episodes and saw how the show portrayed Texas oil executives and the petroleum industry in general, he became increasingly uncomfortable with what he was seeing on screen. The character of J.R. Ewing was depicted as ruthless, manipulative, and willing to use any underhanded tactics to get ahead in the oil business, which Box felt reflected poorly on real people working in the Texas oil industry. Box was particularly concerned that Dallas was perpetuating negative stereotypes about oil executives and Texas business people, showing them as greedy and corrupt individuals who cared more about money than ethics or family relationships. As someone who had connections to the oil industry himself, Box worried that the show's unflattering portrayal would damage the reputation of legitimate oil companies and workers throughout Texas, who conducted their business honestly and professionally. At the end of the first season, Box made the decision to ask the Dallas production team to leave his property and find somewhere else to film future episodes. This forced the producers to scramble to find a new location that could serve as the Ewing family ranch, eventually leading them to settle on Duncan Acres near Plano, Texas, which became the South Fork Ranch that fans recognize today. The original mansion at the Cloyce Box Ranch was tragically destroyed in a fire during 1987, but the frame of that first South Fork still stands in Frisco, Texas, as a reminder of where the famous oil family drama first began. Fact 5. J.R. was supposed to be a supporting character. The character who became television's most famous villain was never intended to be the star of Dallas, and the show's original concept centered around a completely different character as the main focus. When creators first developed the series, they envisioned it as a starring vehicle for Victoria Principal, who played Pamela Barnes Ewing because her character was designed to serve as the crucial bridge between the two feuding families at the heart of the show's drama. The original storyline was built around the idea that Pam would act as a buffer between the wealthy Ewing family and the struggling Barnes family, with her marriage to Bobby Ewing representing the central conflict that would drive most of the show's plots. As the daughter of Digger Barnes, who had a long-standing grudge against the Ewing patriarch Jock, Pam was supposed to be caught in the middle of this generational feud while trying to make her marriage work despite the hostility between their families. In this original vision, J.R. Ewing was planned as more of a supporting character who would create obstacles for Pam and Bobby's relationship, but he wasn't meant to be the primary focus of the show's storylines. The producers expected that viewers would be most interested in following Pam's journey as she navigated the complicated dynamics of marrying into a family that her own relatives considered enemies, while dealing with the culture clash between her modest background and the Ewing family's extreme wealth. However, Larry Hagman's portrayal of J.R. was so compelling and charismatic that he quickly began stealing scenes and capturing audience attention in ways the producers never anticipated. Hagman brought such energy and complexity to the role of the scheming oil executive that viewers found themselves fascinated by J.R.'s schemes and manipulations, even when they were supposed to be rooting against him. The producers were smart enough to recognize what was happening and began shifting the show's focus toward J.R.'s various plots and business dealings, eventually making him the central character around which all other storylines revolved, while Victoria Principal's Pam became more of a supporting player in what was originally supposed to be her own show. Fact 6. Everyone shot J.R. to keep secret. The producers of Dallas went to extraordinary lengths to protect the secret of who shot J.R., creating one of the most elaborate deception campaigns in television history that involved filming fake scenes with nearly everyone connected to the show. To ensure that no one could leak the identity of the real shooter, the production team actually filmed scenes showing every single actor and crew member pulling the trigger on the show's most famous villain. This meant that not only did they film all the obvious suspects, like Sue Ellen, Bobby, and Cliff Barnes shooting J.R. in his office, but they also created scenes with actors who had no logical reason to want J.R. dead, just to throw people off the scent. The deception was so thorough that they even filmed Larry Hagman himself shooting J.R., which would have been physically impossible since he was playing the victim, but they wanted to make sure that absolutely no one could guess the real answer based on which actors were called in for the shooting scenes. The crew members were included in this elaborate ruse as well, with camera operators, lighting technicians, and other behind-the-scenes workers all taking turns pointing the gun at J.R. and pretending to fire the fatal shots. This created a massive collection of footage that served no purpose other than to confuse anyone who might try to figure out the mystery by watching what was being filmed or seeing which actors were involved in the shooting scenes. The strategy worked perfectly because it meant that literally dozens of people had been filmed as potential shooters, making it impossible for anyone to narrow down the possibilities based on production information. Even people working on the show couldn't be sure who the real shooter was supposed to be, since they had all participated in filming the shooting scene at some point during production. This level of secrecy was unprecedented for a television show at the time, and it helped build the incredible anticipation that made the eventual revelation one of the most watched episodes in television history when the mystery was finally solved months later. Fact 7. The shooter was Bing Crosby's daughter. The answer to television's most famous mystery came from an unexpected source when it was revealed that Mary Crosby, the daughter of legendary crooner Bing Crosby, was the person who pulled the trigger on J.R. Ewing. Mary Crosby played Kristen Shepherd, J.R.'s scheming mistress and sister-in-law, who shot him in a fit of anger during the show's most iconic cliffhanger episode. The revelation came on November 21, 1980. During an episode that drew an estimated 83 million American viewers and 350 million viewers worldwide, making it one of the most watched television broadcasts in history. The irony of having Bing Crosby's daughter be the one to commit television's most famous crime added an extra layer of intrigue to the already sensational storyline, since Bing Crosby was known for his wholesome image as the singer of White Christmas and other beloved American standards. Mary Crosby had gotten her role on Dallas when the show wasn't yet the massive phenomenon it would become, and she literally rode along as the series grew more and more popular throughout the late 1970s. She later joked that being the one who shot J.R. made her a permanent trivia question, saying that it made her really big in really small countries around the world, where Dallas had become a cultural obsession. The secrecy surrounding the shooting was so intense that even royalty got caught up in the mystery. When Larry Hagman met the Queen Mother of England, she actually leaned in and politely asked him, "Who did it?" But Hagman refused to reveal the answer even to British royalty, telling her, "Not even for you." The international fascination with the mystery showed just how far Dallas had reached beyond American television, turning a prime-time soap opera into a global cultural event that had everyone from world leaders to ordinary viewers desperately waiting to find out which character had tried to kill the man everyone loved to hate. Fact 8. Patrick Duffy's wife created Dream Season. One of the most controversial plot twists in television history came about because of a brilliant suggestion from Patrick Duffy's real-life wife, who solved what seemed like an impossible storytelling problem with a single creative idea. When Patrick Duffy decided to leave Dallas at the end of Season 8 to pursue other opportunities, the producers killed off his character Bobby Ewing in a dramatic car accident that left fans devastated and the show struggling with declining ratings. After Bobby's death proved to be a major mistake that hurt the show's popularity, the producers desperately wanted Patrick Duffy to return, but they faced a seemingly insurmountable challenge of how to bring back a character who had died on screen in front of millions of viewers. The writers considered various soap opera tricks, like revealing that Bobby had a secret twin brother, or that he had somehow miraculously survived the accident despite appearing clearly dead, but none of these solutions felt satisfying or believable, even by soap opera standards. When the producers approached Patrick Duffy about returning to the show in 1986, he was interested, but couldn't figure out how the writers could logically explain Bobby's resurrection without making the show seem ridiculous. It was Duffy's wife, Carlin Rosser, who came up with the solution that would become one of the most talked-about plot devices in television history. She suggested that the only way Bobby could return would be if his death had never actually happened at all, and that everything viewers had seen during his absence was actually just a dream. This meant that the entire 9th season of Dallas, including Bobby's death and all the storylines that followed, would be revealed as nothing more than a lengthy nightmare experienced by Bobby's wife, Pam. The idea was so audacious and unprecedented that it shocked both fans and critics, but it provided the perfect explanation for Bobby's return while allowing the show to erase a full year of storylines that had proven unpopular with viewers. Carlin Rosser's creative solution became known as the Dream Season, and it remains one of the most famous examples of a television show using an extreme plot device to fix a major storytelling mistake. Fact 9. The Dream Season broke Knots Landing forever. Dallas's decision to reveal an entire season as a dream created an unexpected casualty that permanently damaged the relationship between two of television's most successful prime-time soap operas. Knots Landing, which had started as a spin-off from Dallas in 1979, had built many of its own storylines around events that happened on the parent show, including Bobby Ewing's death, which had significant impact on several Knots Landing characters. When Bobby died at the end of Dallas Season 8, the writers of Knots Landing incorporated his death into their own show's plots because the two series shared the same fictional universe and several characters moved between both programs. Gary Ewing, who was Bobby's brother and a main character on Knots Landing, grieved for his dead sibling. And the show explored how Bobby's death affected the entire extended Ewing family. Gary's wife, Valine, even named their newborn son Bobby in honor of her deceased brother-in-law, creating a touching tribute that became part of Knots Landing's ongoing storyline. The problem arose when Dallas decided to bring Patrick Duffy back by revealing that Bobby's death and the entire 9th season had been nothing more than Pam's dream. This meant that, according to Dallas, Bobby had never actually died, which created a major continuity nightmare for Knots Landing. The Knots Landing producers were faced with the impossible choice of either going along with Dallas's dream explanation, which would mean erasing their own year's worth of storylines about Bobby's death and its aftermath, or refusing to acknowledge that Bobby was alive again. Unlike the Dallas producers, who were willing to sacrifice an entire season to fix their mistake, the Knots Landing creators were not prepared to reset their own series and undo the emotional storylines they had built around Bobby's death. They had invested too much in their character's grief and recovery to simply pretend it had never happened. This fundamental disagreement about how to handle the continuity problem resulted in the two shows permanently cutting ties with each other, ending years of crossover episodes and shared storylines that had connected the two series since Knots Landing's creation. Fact 10. Donna Reed replaced Miss Ellie in controversy. One of the most scandalous behind-the-scenes dramas in Dallas history involved the temporary replacement of beloved actress Barbara Bel Geddes with movie and television star Donna Reed, creating a real-world soap opera that rivaled anything happening on screen. The controversy began when Barbara Bel Geddes, who had played the Ewing family matriarch Miss Ellie since the show's beginning, underwent quadruple heart bypass surgery in March of 1983 and needed time to recover from the major operation. After missing several episodes during her recovery period, Bel Geddes returned to finish Season 7. But tensions arose between her representatives and the Dallas producers over her future workload and salary requirements. The producers wanted to reduce both her episode appearances and her pay, while Bel Geddes's agents argued that she deserved better treatment given her importance to the show and her Emmy Award-winning performance as the family's moral center. When negotiations broke down, the producers made the controversial decision to replace Bel Geddes entirely with Donna Reed, the wholesome star of The Donna Reed Show and numerous Hollywood films from the 1940s and 50s. Reed signed a 3-year contract to take over the role of Miss Ellie for the 1984 to 1985 season, but her version of the character felt dramatically different from Bel Geddes's more down-to-earth portrayal, with Reed bringing a more glamorous and aristocratic feel to the role that didn't quite fit with the character's established personality. The situation became even messier when the producers decided they wanted Bel Geddes back and abruptly fired Reed after just 1 season, despite her multi-year contract. Reed was understandably furious about being dismissed so suddenly and filed a lawsuit against the production company for breach of contract. The legal battle that followed was settled out of court, with Reed reportedly receiving over $1 million in compensation for being wrongfully terminated from her contract. The entire episode became a cautionary tale about the dangers of recasting beloved characters, and it demonstrated how business decisions could create lasting damage to both the show and the careers of everyone involved. Fact 11. Jim Davis worked while dying of cancer. Jim Davis, who played the tough and commanding Ewing patriarch Jock, demonstrated incredible dedication to Dallas by continuing to work on the show even after receiving a devastating cancer diagnosis during the 4th season. Davis was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, a serious form of blood cancer that affects the bone marrow, but he refused to let his illness stop him from fulfilling his role as the head of the Ewing family for as long as his body would allow. As Season 4 progressed and Davis's condition worsened, viewers who were paying close attention could actually see the physical effects of his illness and cancer treatment reflected in his performance. The writers and directors began accommodating his declining health by structuring scenes so that Davis could remain seated whenever possible, which helped conserve his energy during the demanding filming schedule. His once powerful voice, which had been perfect for portraying the gruff and authoritative oil baron, gradually became softer and more strained as the cancer and chemotherapy treatments took their toll on his body. One of the most poignant aspects of Davis's battle with cancer was that he wore a hairpiece during filming to cover the hair loss caused by his chemotherapy treatments, allowing him to maintain Jock Ewing's distinctive appearance even as he fought for his life behind the scenes. The makeup and wardrobe departments worked closely with Davis to help him look as much like his character as possible, ensuring that viewers wouldn't be distracted by the visible signs of his illness. Davis's final scenes were particularly heartbreaking for those who knew what he was going through personally. In the episode New Beginnings, his last appearance on the show, Davis was so weak that he could only manage one scene where Jock and Miss Ellie leave for their second honeymoon. If you watch that scene carefully, you can actually see that Davis's lip movements don't quite match his dialogue because his condition was so poor that he had to overdub his final line of dialogue in post-production. He died on April 26, 1981, at the age of 71, leaving behind a legacy of professionalism and dedication that inspired his fellow cast members. Fact 12. Romania built a fake South Fork. The global obsession with Dallas reached such extreme heights that a wealthy Romanian businessman actually built his own version of the famous Ewing Ranch, complete with elaborate facilities designed to recreate the luxurious lifestyle shown on the American television series. Ilie Alexandru, a Romanian tycoon who had become fascinated with the show and particularly with the character of J.R. Ewing, decided that he wanted to live like the scheming oil baron he watched on television every week. Alexandru constructed an entire hotel and entertainment complex in Slobozia, Romania, which he named Parcul Vacante Hermes, but which became better known by its nickname South Forkscu, combining the famous ranch name with a Romanian suffix. The ambitious project was Alexandru's attempt to bring the glamorous world of Dallas to Eastern Europe, allowing him and other fans of the show to experience what they imagined life would be like as members of the wealthy Ewing family. The complex wasn't just a simple hotel designed to look like South Fork Ranch, but rather an elaborate recreation that included many of the luxury amenities that viewers associated with the Ewing lifestyle. Alexandru built horse stables on the property to mirror the ranching aspects of the original South Fork, and he even constructed polo fields where guests could participate in the kind of elite sporting activities that seemed fitting for oil baron millionaires. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Romanian South Fork also featured its own replica of the Eiffel Tower, adding a touch of international sophistication that went beyond what was shown on the actual television series. Alexandru's motivation for creating this elaborate Dallas-themed destination came from his desire to emulate J.R. Ewing's success and lifestyle, viewing the fictional character as a role model for how wealthy businessmen should live and conduct themselves. The fact that he was willing to invest the enormous amount of money required to build such an extensive facility shows just how deeply Dallas had penetrated international culture, inspiring people around the world to try to recreate the show's vision of American wealth and power in their own countries and contexts. Fact 13. Larry Hagman earned secret Russian money. Larry Hagman developed an unexpected and highly secretive business relationship with communist Eastern Europe that remained hidden from the public throughout his entire lifetime, only coming to light after his death in 2012. Despite playing the ultimate capitalist villain on Dallas, Hagman had quietly maintained friendly relationships with officials in communist Bucharest, which led to a lucrative but mysterious endorsement deal that he kept completely under wraps for decades. The arrangement involved Hagman allowing his image and likeness to be used in advertising campaigns for Lukoil, which was a major Russian oil company, with significant operations throughout the Soviet bloc during the height of the Cold War. This created the ironic situation where the actor who portrayed America's most famous fictional oil tycoon was secretly being paid by a Russian oil firm to help promote their business interests in Eastern European markets, where Dallas had become enormously popular. Hagman received substantial financial compensation for this endorsement deal, but he was extremely careful to keep the arrangement completely confidential throughout his life. He apparently felt that American audiences and his fellow Dallas cast members might not understand or approve of his business relationships with communist countries, especially during a time when tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were still running high in many parts of the world. The secrecy surrounding this deal was so complete that even people close to Hagman were unaware of his financial connections to the Russian oil industry. It was only after his death from cancer complications in November of 2012 that details about his Lukoil endorsement arrangement finally leaked to the press. The revelation added another layer to Hagman's already complex public persona, showing that the man who played J.R. Ewing was capable of conducting his own secretive business deals that would have made his fictional character proud, even if those deals crossed international political boundaries that many Americans would have found controversial during the Cold War era. Fact 14. Cowboy hats distributed to extras for J.R. Larry Hagman was so concerned about looking out of place while filming Dallas that the production team had to maintain an entire wardrobe department dedicated to making sure he wouldn't be the only person wearing a cowboy hat during downtown Dallas shooting locations. This unusual situation arose because Hagman's character J.R. Ewing was designed to embody the stereotypical image of a wealthy Texas oil man, complete with the classic cowboy hat that many people associated with successful businessmen from the Lone Star State. The problem was that by the late 1970s, most people walking around downtown Dallas during regular business hours were not actually wearing cowboy hats as part of their daily attire. The city had evolved into a modern metropolitan area where business professionals dressed much like their counterparts in New York or Chicago, with suits and ties being far more common than traditional Western wear. This created an awkward situation where Hagman would have stood out as the only person in any given scene wearing the distinctive hat that was so important to his character's image. To solve this problem, the Dallas production team came up with a creative workaround that involved keeping a large supply of cowboy hats on hand whenever they filmed scenes in public locations around the city. When setting up shots in downtown Dallas or other urban areas, the costume department would distribute these hats to background actors and extras, ensuring that Hagman wouldn't be the only person in the scene wearing traditional Western headwear. This attention to detail shows how much thought went into maintaining the authenticity of JR's character, even when that authenticity didn't quite match the reality of modern Dallas life. Hagman apparently felt strongly enough about this issue that he specifically requested the production team take these steps to avoid making him look odd or out of place. The fact that dozens of extras had to be given cowboy hats just so one actor would feel comfortable demonstrates the level of care that went into creating the Dallas aesthetic that television viewers around the world came to associate with Texas oil wealth. Fact 15. Lucy and Ray's incestuous relationship disappeared. Dallas accidentally created one of the most uncomfortable family situations in television history when the writers inadvertently turned a romantic relationship between two characters into an incestuous affair, then simply pretended it had never happened once they realized their mistake. During the early seasons of the show, Lucy Ewing, the teenage niece who lived at South Fork Ranch, was frequently portrayed as having a romantic and physical relationship with Ray Krebs, the handsome ranch foreman who worked on the family property. Lucy, played by Charlene Tilton, was supposed to be the wild and rebellious member of the younger generation of Ewings, and her attraction to the older, rugged cowboy Ray seemed like a natural fit for her character's tendency to get involved with inappropriate men. Ray, played by Steve Cannelly, was initially introduced as just an employee of the ranch who had previously dated Pam Barnes before she married Bobby Ewing, so there seemed to be nothing problematic about his romantic involvement with Lucy. The major problem arose several seasons later, when the writers decided to reveal that Ray was actually Jock Ewing's illegitimate son, born from an affair that the Ewing patriarch had during his younger years. This revelation was intended to add drama and complexity to Ray's relationship with the Ewing family, showing that he had been working on his own father's ranch without knowing his true connection to the family that employed him. However, this plot twist created a horrifying realization for both the writers and viewers who had been paying attention to the earlier seasons. If Ray was Jock's son, that meant he was actually Lucy's uncle, since Lucy was the daughter of Jock's middle son, Gary Ewing. The romantic relationship that had been portrayed as a typical soap opera romance between a rebellious young woman and an older man was suddenly revealed to be an incestuous affair between an uncle and his teenage niece. Rather than address this uncomfortable situation directly, the show's writers simply stopped mentioning the previous romantic connection between Lucy and Ray, hoping that viewers would forget about their earlier relationship and move on to other storylines.